vehicle.
Record this. I'm at my house, bro.
Get out of the vehicle.
Record this. Record this. No, bro, I'm not. Record this.
Sir, why does he need to step out of the vehicle?
I'm at my house.
Because he's not cooperating with me. He keeps trying to get out of the vehicle.
No, I'm not.
No, he's not. He's sitting here next to me.
I'm sitting here right now.
But
record this.
Sir,
I've asked you to step out of the vehicle.
I'm at my house. I'm at my house, sir. I'm trying to get into my house. I'm trying to get into my house.
I don't care. Get out of the vehicle.
Bro,
Right?
which charge are you pressing me against? What charge?
You're being detained right now. Get out of the
What
vehicle.
Sir,
charge?
why is he being
What
detained?
charge? What charge?
You got a brake light out. You're not being
That's not a
cooperative.
charge.
We
I'm at my
are being
house.
cooperative. We
matter.
are
You're
being
just- I'm at my
cooperative.
house,
Sir,
bro.
Get out of the vehicle.
No.
Sir, we
You have
are
no
being
right.
cooperative.
You need a
Sir,
search warrant.
we are
You're
being.
harassing me. I'm suing you.
Sir,
Go ahead.
sir, we are being cooperative.
Bro, look at this shit. You
Sir,
see this?
We're being cooperative.
You see this shit?
Sir,
Get out of the car.
you said our brake lights out, and we're gonna.
We're at the house
I
now.
asked
We're
him to
not
step out of the
driving.
vehicle.
Okay,
We're not
Ellie, just step
driving.
out. You
Get out of
don't,
the car.
Ellie, just step out of the
Bro,
car for a
I'm not
second.
doing it in no handcuffs,
Get
bro.
out of the car.
Okay,
right now.
Ellie,
Bro,
just step
get
out.
off me.
Ellie,
Get
don't
your
have a
hands
choice.
off me. Get your hands off me.
I'm not taking my hands
Bro,
off.
get your
out of the
hands.
car.
I'm not
Why-
going nowhere
I
to
don't-
your hands.
Get out of the car.
But I'm
What
gonna
are you-
sue you, bro.
Go
You're
ahead,
on,
do it.
bro.
Why
You're on my property, bro. This is mine, bro.
I don't care.
This
Get
is
out of
my
the car.
property. No, bro.
Get out of the
Ellie,
car.
Ellie,
bro.
Ellie,
No,
Ellie,
I'm not going
Ellie,
nowhere, bro.
Ellie,
I'm
let's
not
just
going
Ellie
nowhere,
step
bro.
out of the car. Ellie,
Let go of the steering wheel.
Bro, I'm going out the car. I'm going to my house.
Ellie,
Get
just.
in the car.
Move.
Oh my God. Ellie, Ellie, Ellie.
Umbrella. She's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live, back again with another episode of The Forecast. So, in New York, a mentally ill brother, Donald Ivy, was walking down the street minding his own business when Albany Police decided to stop and harass him, which led to him being tasered to death. So let's see what reason the police had to murder this unarmed brother.
Our other big story tonight, a family and community looking for answers tonight after a man dealing with mental illness dies after being tased by Albany Police.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Cries of frustration on the streets of Albany. These men and women are angry that it's now been 1 month since the death of Donald Ivy and still no answers.
They have a very hard line that they will not release any more information until the DA's investigation is complete. And I'm sure that even when it is complete, we will not get sort of the answers and the justice that we're seeking.
Ivy died shortly after a run-in with police last month. Police say he was walking in the area of Larkin 2nd when they approached him for acting suspiciously, then tased him. The 3 officers involved were placed on leave but have not been charged in Ivy's death.
39-year-old Donald Dante Ivy got into some sort of altercation with police when he went out for a long walk not long after midnight. It happened this morning in the area of Larkin 2nd Streets. His sister tells us Ivy was taking a variety of medications for mental health issues and would often walk at that time of night to clear his head. Police say he was acting suspiciously and quickly became combative. He was tased but still managed to run. He was eventually cuffed, and then police saw he was having trouble breathing. Ivy's family says this didn't have to happen.
And I think it's the approach, the way they approach them. If they had come up and said, hey, buddy, what's up? You know, what are you doing out here this late? You know, and maybe would have came into a conversation other than a death.
What I will tell you is that it's going to be a complete investigation, and we're going to be, as transparent as we can. We're going to make sure that everybody will eventually know all of the facts.
It just seems so senseless to me, like this could have been avoided. So I just have all types of emotions about it right now.
It's not just Baltimore, it's not just Ferguson, it's not just Oakland or Los Angeles, it's also Albany. Right? Albany has an issue with police violence and police brutality, right?
Late this evening, police released the names of the 3 officers involved. We have them for you right here. They are officers Joshua Sears, Michael Mahany, and Charles Skinkle. They are all now on paid administrative leave. The family has expressed some concerns about the amount of time that lapsed before help arrived for Don Ivy. We want to give you the timeline provided by the police department. At 12:36 a.m., officers had their contact with Mr. Ivy. At 12:47, 11 minutes later, officers start requesting Albany Fire Department Medical Services emergency help. At 12:50, 3 minutes after that emergency medical services, they arrive at the scene. Then at 1:10, 20 minutes after that, Mohawk Ambulance arrives at Albany Medical Center with Donald Ivy. All of that will be looked at as police continue their investigation. Family and friends say they are planning a rally in front of police headquarters tomorrow night.
So this brother Donald Ivy was walking down the street minding his own business. He was unarmed. He didn't commit a crime. But Albany Police said they saw him walking and he looked suspicious because he had a coat on and he had his hands in his pocket. So officers Joshua Sears, Michael Mahany, and Charles Skinkle, who were all a part of an anti-gang force, but this brother wasn't in a gang, and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. But they said they had reasonable suspicion that crime activity was afoot. So because the brother Donald Ivy chose to walk down the street with a coat on and put his hands in his pocket, that's all the Albany police needed to violate his Fourth Amendment rights and search him, which goes along with those stop and frisk policies that Giuliani talks about in New York. And it's not just New York. You'll be stopped and frisked in America anytime a cop feels like it, no matter where you are. It's just New York had no problem putting it on the books. But as these three cops violate this brother's Fourth Amendment rights, they claim this brother was aggressive and they had an altercation and then he took off running. And then the police said, well, we tasered him 5 times and it didn't work. And then we tasered him 2 more times and then it did work. And I guess it did work if your goal was to kill him. But they said they tasered him 5 times and he continued to struggle. But at no point in the video do you see him struggling. You see him running and then you see him on the ground. And then after they taser him 2 more times, the police claim that's when he suffered a medical emergency and lost consciousness. It wasn't while they were tasering him and doing whatever else. He didn't have a medical emergency until after all of this happened. And the police are saying that to say, well, it wasn't anything that they did that made him die. He had a medical emergency because of something else, not because of what we did. But since they don't have a body camera, we don't know what else they could have did. And the police weren't going to release the video at all until his family saw the video and started making claims about what happened to him. Then they decided to release the video to try to prove his family members wrong.
New video out tonight that shows some of what happened between Albany Police and Dante Ivy the night he died last April.
That's the night he was tasered while being arrested, and the video comes out 2 days after a grand jury refused to indict the police officers involved.
We have team coverage tonight. You can see Tori Wells has the video that was viewed today with Albany Police.
And Jennifer Lukey is outside a rally where people are demanding justice as they see it in the Dante Ivy case. We're going to start, though, with you, Tori, if we can. What does the video show and why the release now?
First, I want to just show you the crowd that is gathered here in front of the police department. They're chanting, "Let us in." And as you mentioned, Den, Lukey's going to have their message in just a minute. About that video, though, in it, you do see police officers and Donald Ivy running through the street at one point. You see officers performing CPR at another point. Other than that, though, it's difficult to know exactly what's going on because some of that video is dark, it's grainy, or it's blocked by another police car. Albany police say this video shows the night Donald Ivy was stopped, then tasered by police. Chief Brendan Cox says he decided to release this video after hearing this from Ivy's family in an interview yesterday.
I saw the police taking their batons, beating him like this, beating him on his leg. The part that got me more than anything is when I saw an officer spit on him in the video.
Certainly our hearts still go out to the Ivy family, and we know they're still grieving, and we know they've been through a lot of trauma, but there's some things that were said that aren't accurate.
Police showed us 3 angles. This one from a nearby building shoots down the street. In the distance, you can see a police car. The chief says this is when officers first stop Ivy because they think he could be carrying a gun. He says the conversation begins fine, but then turns when officers try to pat Ivy down. They try to taser him, and he runs. You can see that from this angle, too. The chief admits both of these videos are dark, grainy, and far away. This is the last video police showed us from a police dash cam. We're going to freeze it as this officer pulls up.
At this point, they're struggling to get him into custody.
This shot is partially blocked by another car. Police tell us what we can't see is Ivy on the ground with an officer or 2 holding his feet. Right here, where you can see some more movement, police say officers realize Ivy is in distress. We're slowing this part down to show you this.
The one officer's head kind of popping up and down. They are starting CPR.
Paramedics arrived shortly after.
This is a night nobody wanted to happen. Those officers didn't want that to happen. We didn't want that to happen. But nobody was beating Mr. Ivy down with batons, and nobody spit on Mr. Ivy.
Police tell us this is the only video they have from that evening. They tell us body cameras, of course, would have been helpful here, and that is the plan for this department in the coming months and coming years. Now, there have been quite a few questions about the taser in this incident. The chief told us that the taser was used 5 times but didn't work, used with the prongs and the wires. He says officers then used the taser in a stun drive mode twice, and that did work.
Now, the police will release these videos if they think it will help them. And in a lot of these cases, when they say they don't have body camera footage, it doesn't necessarily mean they don't have video. But the Albany Police Chief Brendan Cox decided to release this footage, now realizing that it contradicted their original story about how he became aggressive and they had a physical altercation. When you can see he just took off running, he didn't try to fight anybody, he was trying to run away. So they tased him 7 times. And within 12 minutes, they went from stopping his brother Donald Ivy for no particular reason other than he looked suspicious to calling for medical help after you killed this brother. Now, these 3 cops were given a paid vacation, and eventually a grand jury cleared these cops of all charges, saying these cops followed proper procedure and protocol.
And that grand jury has cleared each of the 3 police officers of any wrongdoing in the death of Dante Ivy.
During a dramatic press conference this afternoon, Albany County D.A. David Soares said he followed through on a promise to Ivy's family, to the police, and to the public.
That promise to conduct a full, fair, independent, and impartial investigation.
And he said his office checked every shred of evidence available: police video, interviews, taser analysis, medical evidence, and more.
However, he also said not all the police car cameras were working properly that night, and the absence of that video affected the investigation.
We have team coverage of the grand jury decision. Tori Wells with the DA's announcement, Craig Smith with reaction from Albany's police chief, and with our newest reporter, Hubert Wiggins, on the reaction from Ivy's family.
Tori, we start things out with you outside the courthouse.
Well, the district attorney says that he released the grand jury decision along with this information that his office gathered today because he wanted to be transparent to the community. But he says this discussion is not over because there are changes in Albany that need to be made. Now, the grand jury was tasked with considering the cause of Ivy's death. To bring a homicide charge, they would have had to determine that the officer's actions contributed to the cause of death and that they should have expected their actions would have caused his death. That was not the case here. District Attorney David Soares says the medical examiner doesn't believe that the tasing caused Ivy's death. Soares says he told Ivy's family that decision today, and he was open about how difficult that was.
I've never experienced interaction with a family who has consistently demonstrated grace and patience as the Ivy family.
Moving forward, the district attorney says Albany has work to do when it comes to training officers to better identify people who have a mental illness. When it comes to the use of cameras, he says more of that would have helped with this investigation. And he says Albany needs to work on community and police relations.
At the end of the day, we're left with asking the question, why can't young men of color walk through the streets at certain times of night without police interaction? The question is a simple one to ask. The answers are, however, much more complicated. Because in a city where you have 4 shootings in one weekend, you also have to consider what it is that we're placing upon our men and women who wear the uniform.
And the district attorney says those difficult questions will take time to answer, but he is committed to that, and he will be following up with other city and community leaders on that.
So I guess proper protocol is stopping somebody for no reason, just because they look suspicious, and even though you're unarmed, still violate your 4th Amendment rights and still commit illegal searches on you. And the D.A. David Soares said, we feel bad that we have to profile and violate your rights and that people have to die. But you know, black on black crime, so we have to racially profile you. And if we got to kill a few people, then oh well, that's what we have to do. This brother was walking down the street minding his own business and was tasered to death. all within 12 minutes. And then they justified it by saying, well, it wasn't the cops' actions that caused his death, even though he died of cardiac arrest. And it's our fault that they have to profile us and violate our constitutional rights. And it's definitely our fault if they're forced to kill one of us. And of course these stop and frisk policies aren't about race because they don't see color, even though 80% of the people arrested in Albany for weed were black. Not that black people do more drugs than white people. The drug epidemic is happening in the white community. What they're really trying to say is, well, black people are just inherently more violent. They can't see race and they're so colorblind, but then they'll turn around and justify profiling you by race. But as long as we let them investigate themselves and cry and beg and pray that they hold themselves accountable and give us justice by punishing themselves, at some point we're going to have to stop the insanity and doing the same things over and over and over and put aside our tribalisms and start doing what we have to do to make sure that we can protect ourselves. At the end of the day, we all we got.
The jury's decision to not indict Officer Pantaleo sparking protests across the country, including right here in Albany, with the protest taking place early this evening at the Public Safety Building in Albany. And News 10 ABC's Amy Keller is there. She joins us now live with more. Amy.
Elisa, that protest is actually still going strong. They've moved from the Public Safety Building here, the intersection of Henry Johnson and Livingston. There's more than 100 protesters out here. Maybe a dozen or so of them are actually sitting on the ground in a circle in the road here. Police are having to direct traffic off of 90 onto Livingston, away from Henry Johnson. At this point, it has remained peaceful. Protesters I spoke with say they had to take a stand because they don't believe justice is being served. Strong accusations, yes, but protesters say they're true, that they're sick and tired of police using excessive force and getting away with it. The latest incident occurred Wednesday. That's when a grand jury decided not to file charges against a New York City cop. That officer is accused of causing the death of an unarmed black man, Eric Gardner.
2 non-indictments have occurred and nobody has said anything. So I decided that it was time that we speak out. Something needs to be fixed because something is obviously wrong.
Students at St. Rose joined together across Madison Avenue, blocking the road to traffic. In a separate event, dozens gathered at the Public Safety Building in Albany, all with the same message: Black Lives Matter. Albany Police Chief Stephen Krokoff says he can understand where the anger is coming from.
A lot of what you hear is born out of a long history of law enforcement being used to oppress people. I mean, that's irrefutable.
I spoke with Krokoff at a state conference this afternoon. Law enforcement from across New York came together to discuss proactive ways they can stop gun violence. Since becoming police chief, Krokoff has placed an emphasis on community policing and says he takes reports about officers using excessive force seriously.
Anytime we get an allegation of excessive use of force, not only is it investigated through my my Office of Professional Standards, it's then reviewed through our monitors, through the independent CPRB and through the Center for Law and Justice of the Albany Law School.
Again, more than 100 protesters out here at the intersection of Henry Johnson and Livingston to protest that grand jury's decision. It remains peaceful right now.
For Complex News, I'm Natasha Martinez. BuzzFeed News published a damaging report for the NYPD early Monday morning. An anonymous source gave the outlet hundreds of internal files from the NYPD that showed officers committing fireable offenses like lying and brutally beating people, but still have kept their jobs. At least 319 officers from 2011 to 2015 have committed crimes that include lying, cheating, stealing, or assaulting New York City residents. The article breaks it down, showing that at least 50 employees lied on record or under an oath of some kind. 38 were found guilty of using excessive force, 57 have been driving under the influence, and several were accused of inappropriate behavior relating to sexual harassment, including one officer who touched and kissed a student while on duty at a school. The offenses are shocking, but what the NYPD chose to do with these officers is even more alarming. BuzzFeed writes that instead of those cops getting fired, the commissioner gave them dismissal probation, which means practically practically nothing, as officers continue to perform their jobs with the same salary. According to the report, which is the first of an ongoing investigation by BuzzFeed, many of the 319 officers still work for the NYPD today. The investigation outs the secrecy surrounding the internal misconduct of NYPD officers due to a law that shields those records from becoming public. The law also prevents citizens from being able to look up officers involved in their arrests to see if they have a history of lying or other abuses of power. BuzzFeed's report comes hot on the heels of another police misconduct scandal surrounding the Baltimore Police Department, which is being investigated for planting drugs and weapons, robbing citizens, and other crimes. And to put things into perspective, the NYPD scandal spans over half a decade.
Caught on camera, there is shock and anger about this police body cam video. A cop using a taser and pepper spray on a man who was having a medical emergency while driving his car. That officer already resigned, and ABC's Alex Perez is here with more on the outrage and the fallout. Good morning, Alex.
Hey, Paula, as you said, one officer has already resigned, and this morning authorities are now investigating whether 2 other officers acted inappropriately. It all started as a call for a hit-and-run accident, but things quickly got ugly. This morning, tense moments caught on tape. Police body cam video shows officers in Fredericksburg, Virginia, drawing their guns.
Let me see your other hand right now!
And yelling at a man who's sitting in the driver's seat and appears to be unresponsive.
Put your hands up, both of them, now!
Police called to the scene after Washington allegedly drove his silver Hyundai the wrong way down the street, hit another car, kept moving, and then struck a median. Officer Sean Jurgens then tases Washington, even though he does not appear to be moving. But the taser fails. Jurgens then pepper sprays him. Turns out the man, 34-year-old David Washington, was having some sort of medical emergency.
Get out the car, I'm gonna smoke you. Get out the car, right now.
Finally, threatening Washington and demanding he get out of the car.
That's the point, get out. Don't move around.
The officers then drag him out of the car. Washington can be heard moaning. An ambulance eventually arrives and takes Washington to the hospital.
The officers on duty didn't assess the situation correctly, and they had the time to do so.
Officer Jurgens has now resigned, and in a statement, Fredericksburg Police saying the use of force demonstrated in the incident involving Mr. Washington was not in compliance with department policy or training. Now, we did reach out to Washington to see how he was doing, but our calls were not returned. Authorities did not reveal exactly what kind of medical problem he was having, but he could still face criminal charges. Officer Jurgens, in a letter to a local newspaper, says he believes, given the situation, he did what he had to do. Paula, Dan?
Tough to watch that footage, though. Really tough.
And still a few unanswered questions here, so we're hoping we're going to learn more as things develop. But yeah, tough to see that video and to see all of that happen, those tense moments in those few seconds.
And if they didn't have the body cam video in that jurisdiction, we wouldn't even know it existed.
Exactly right.
One of the reasons why so many people are pushing for those.
Exactly.
An Evansville firefighter tells 14 News tonight all he wanted was to be treated like a human being during a police incident.
The off-duty firefighter who had been riding his bicycle claims he was cuffed, thrown to the ground, and threatened with a taser after a police officer thought he had given him the middle finger. Brian Bosen here with the fallout, which includes a police investigation.
David and Jackie, firefighter George Madison Jr. says he doesn't want any publicity. He just doesn't want this to happen to somebody else. We caught up with George tonight, who declined to be interviewed, but George tells us he's shaken by the incident and believes this may have been personal. This is the picture gone viral. Evansville firefighter George Madison Jr. kneeling on the ground near the corner of Riverside and Weinbach in handcuffs. He tells 14 News he was threatened with a taser and scared by the officer's actions.
He called me yesterday afternoon, right after the incident happened, said he was on his bicycle, went through a stop sign, saw a police car, and said that he waved at the officers, but he thinks the officers thought he was flipping them off.
Police Chief Billy Bolin, who is friends with Madison, says the incident is now under investigation.
I know him, I like him, I know the officers involved, I like the officers involved, so my job's to try to figure out the truth no matter who you like.
In a Facebook post, the youth pastor and member of the department's Combat Challenge team says he doesn't think race had anything to do with what happened. He tells 14 News the stop seemed to be more of a personal issue than a professional one.
Just because somebody says something, we can't automatically assume it's the truth. Not saying I'm doubting anything George has said, but we got to hear both sides and get to the bottom of it.
Madison says he's not out to create a media storm and wants the investigation to run its course. He tells 14 News there are great guys on our police department. The officer involved may be one of them, but yesterday he wasn't showing he was.
And the EPD released a statement on this today, reading the investigation began this morning in order to preserve the integrity of the investigation and to ensure fairness for all of the involved parties. The EPD will not comment on the incident at this time. Boland tells us he hasn't spoken with the officers involved and they're not being named yet pending the outcome of the investigation. He says they will be interviewed once Madison files a formal complaint. That could happen next week.
An internal investigation clears an Evansville police officer of any wrongdoing in a traffic stop involving an off-duty Evansville firefighter. And tonight, that firefighter takes to Facebook with a strong response. Brandon Bartlett in our Interactive Center with the latest. Brandon?
Yeah, Jackie, that firefighter firing back late tonight right here on his Facebook page with some very strong words. Now, it's the same Facebook page that he used to share his story that went viral. Tonight, George Madison, the firefighter who was stopped by police last week, says he trusted the system and had faith in the leadership of law enforcement, but goes on to say they threw me under the bus and have shown their true colors. Madison writes that an internal investigation released tonight may have shown that no standard operating procedure was violated by the officer, but he writes his dignity as a human being was. Tonight, Evansville Police cleared Officer Jason Clegg of any wrongdoing when he pulled over Madison for not stopping at a stop sign on his bicycle and for making what officers thought was an aggressive hand movement. Madison has said he was only waving at the officers. Madison made a formal complaint with Evansville Police saying Officer Clegg was angry and aggressive, even unprofessional during that traffic stop. Madison gained a lot of public support after posting a picture and his story on Facebook.
With social media being as big as it is, our officers have to realize that that is our new reality. Things that wouldn't have gone public until maybe after an investigation and someone was not happy with our findings, that stuff will be out there now for public opinion to come in before we're even given an opportunity to address it.
And tonight, the police department says Madison's complaint was based upon his opinion of the officer's communication skills and not the officer's actions. Madison told me tonight he's praying about how to take the next step.
Did he leave again? He was standing right in that corner. Who? Oh, no, it's that guy right there.
That guy?
Yep.
Okay.
He's not allowed. He has a no trespass. He's not supposed to be at all.
Okay.
He's very violent towards us.
Okay.
Colorado 087.
Why are you still here? Why are you still here?
No, he's back. He's back. Give it back. Where's that guy?
You were told to leave, weren't you?
With me?
Yeah.
No, nobody seen me. I left by myself.
You left by yourself. Okay, then why?
Because my bag was here. That's why I came back up here. That's why.
Okay, what's your name?
So what?
I said, what's your name?
At 23.
You have your ID on you?
No, I ain't got no idea.
Okay, what's your name then?
So what's my name?
Yeah, what's your name?
My name, bro. I'm coming to get the bag when I'm leaving. That's why I came back
here.
Hang
on.
Why do you know my name, bro?
Because
I don't care about none of that shit, bro.
I don't care whether you care.
I don't care, bro.
How do you spell your first name? How do you spell your first name? I'm not playing you. What's your first name?
Bro, I told you, bro.
First name.